Hi, I'm Jonathan.
And Kylene Jones, and we're the Provident Preppers.
Today we're going to be talking about how to package your food for long-term storage.
Have you ever wondered how to correctly package your long-term food supply so that it will be good when you open it 25, 30 years from now? Well, in today's video, we're going to teach you the best containers to use as well as the right treatment methods to make sure that your food is good when you need it.
Let's talk about packaging our long-term food storage. We want to make sure that we do it right because it is a significant investment, and we want to make sure that that takes care of us for a long time to come.
Yeah, so if you just put your bags on the shelf like what you see right there, that's not going to last for 25 or 30 years. When you open those bags, that sugar is going to be hard as a brick, and that bag of beans could be infested with beetles, and the air will also degrade it. So that is not the best way to store your food storage, and we're going to show you what is the best way. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start with really high quality food. Now, when we're talking about packaging food storage today, we are talking about dry goods, right? Like flour and sugar and wheat and grains, those types of things. That's what we're talking about. So we want super high quality. It needs to be less than 10% moisture. So you can have one grain, like you could have wheat that was a higher moisture content than the other one, and the one with the low moisture content is the one that is the best candidate for long-term storage. You also want to make sure that it has a low oil content. That's the reason why you can't store brown rice for a long time. White rice will store for 30 years, but brown rice has this very nutritious coating on the outside, the outside bran, which has a high oil content, and that oil goes rancid, and therefore you cannot store it for a very long time. So less than 10% moisture and low in oil content. If you want some more details about this, Google the Provident Prepper long-term food storage creative solutions to build a critical asset. And we've written a killer post there to try and help you understand how to build your long-term food storage.
Let's talk about containers a little bit. Containers are obviously critically important because they are the thing that's going to hold whatever you're putting in there and make sure that it preserves the food for long term. And
they're not all created equal.
And they are not. Absolutely not.
There are some, it's good, better, and best, right? Okay, that paper bag, that was not good. But there are some that will do the job, but there are some that are the best, and we will discuss that.
Right. And there is a post that you can look at there, the Provident Prepper, long-term food storage, best containers, and treatment methods. We encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, that is what this video is based off of today. So this video just gives you a little sneak peek. So if you want the rest of it, make sure that you visit the Provident Prepper.
Number 10 cans are a great choice.
The best choice.
I would agree. They are a little bit more expensive, but when you look at their ability to keep light out, to keep moisture out, keep critters out, overall, it is what allows foods to be 25 or 30 years in storage.
Right, because that the steel can creates a true oxygen barrier, right? Moisture can't get in, air can't get in. It just creates this wonderful little time capsule. So that is the best choice, but it is more expensive because the cans aren't reusable.
However, they can be reusable for a variety of things.
That's right. You could repurpose them.
Right. And you can use the plastic caps to seal them. And obviously, they're not going to then last for 25 or 30 years, but they're still very usable for other things.
But for somebody who stores a lot of food storage, I have more number 10 cans than I could possibly ever repurpose. Thank you, Johnny. All right. So plastic buckets. They come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, and that's one of the reasons why they are so versatile. John loves the square ones because being an engineer, they stack and there's no wasted space.
That's right. And also, as I get older, they're only 4 gallons instead of 5 gallons. And so it makes it just a little easier when you're carrying a couple of them around just a little bit lighter. So I do like those, but there's a whole variety depending on your needs and They all do a great job.
And it is interesting because your personal situation is going to dictate what kind of container you use. It used to be that those 5-gallon buckets weren't that heavy and we had an awful lot of them. But now, as we're getting a little bit older, we're choosing to use smaller containers because they're just more convenient for us. So make sure that you consider that. And one of the things that we like to do with our buckets, in addition to storing grain, and in fact, we should tell you that most of our food is actually stored in the buckets because we use our long-term storage on a daily basis. And so we can just empty that bucket and then we refill it over and over again. So there's very little waste. But one of the things we love to do is to put food that's in their original packaging in those buckets. So for instance, that powdered sugar in the center there, it's in its original packaging. I just put it in the bucket and seal it up. It is amazing. It keeps the moisture from the storage room from contaminating the food supply. That works really well, especially like with containers of salt that they're like a magnet for moisture in the storage room. And so if you put those kinds of things in there and then you just seal them up, it's just fantastic. One of the things that it won't do is you can't treat this. Like we'll talk about treating in a minute. But it will contain, if you have an infestation in that pasta, it will contain it to that bucket and it won't spread to your entire food storage.
Right. Another thing to think about with these is when you put those things in there, it also protects them should you get a rodent in there. It probably wouldn't protect from a rat, but for the most part, the mice aren't going to chew through the buckets unless they're desperate mice.
And then maybe you should move. Hey, one of the other things, if you notice this metal bucket opener, make sure that you have a really good quality bucket opener because they sell some plastic ones that will totally break when you try and pry that lid off. So I love this metal one. Make sure that you do have something that will help you to open buckets well. One of the things, Mylar pouches, okay, they are not an optimal package to store something in, but what makes them really cool is that you can store your own food at home with these because all it takes to seal them up is a straight iron like what you straighten your hair with or a clothes iron, and then you are able to seal up those bags. So you can buy them online and then package all your food storage. You've got oxygen absorbers that you can also buy online.
Correct. Yeah.
But this is really good, but mice will chew right through those and they're just not as sturdy. You could put them inside of one of the 5-gallon buckets and therefore make them really nice and sturdy and create a...
And we've done that quite a bit, and that it does work really well.
Yeah.
The peat bottles. These are a very good, inexpensive source if you need something and you can't afford to buy buckets.
So anytime there would be a party, we would save all of those soda bottles and clean them out really well and fill them with grain. Now be careful that you clean it super well. My method, I take off the cap and sometimes there's a little insert in that cap and I pop it out so that I can make sure I get really clean and underneath there. And I rinse them out super well and then I put them in a bleach solution, a sanitizing bleach solution. So it's a really weak solution, but you just soak it in there. You want about 30 minutes of contact time and then you can air dry them. I air dry them for several days to make sure that they're completely dry, but that should kill any bacteria that might be harboring in there. For storage reasons, sometimes all those bottles are kind of awkward to store. And I found that I could go to the supermarket and get free apple boxes, like the boxes that they bring apples to the supermarket in, and they fit the bottles fairly well and it enabled me to stack them and they just work better in the food storage room.
Glass jars are an excellent thing. Obviously the size limits you somewhat, but for short-term uses they work very well. There is not air infiltration. Obviously there is light infiltration, but as long as they're being used in a relatively short period of time or they're in a cupboard where it's dark, you shouldn't get any food degradation from light.
And these are my favorite. I use these all the time. Would I have my whole food storage in them? Absolutely not. But I buy a lot of different things in bulk. And you can tell from these, I've got old peanut butter jars, old mayonnaise jars, I'll use spaghetti jars because they all clean up really nicely. Glass is a fantastic thing and it's such a tragedy to throw it all away. So this way I'm able to utilize that, repurpose those for a higher cause and not go to the extra expense of buying more jars.
And then we also, when we're not using our glass jars, our canning jars especially, those get filled with water and put in our storage so that we keep that water supply. They store just the same size, full of water or without, so you just as well have that water.
Yeah, so if you look at, this is actually a storage room that Jonathan built me just for my beautiful jars. But if you look in the corner there on the right, you will see all those are filled with water. Some of them are canning jars and some of them are the other jars like peanut butter jars. But he did a fabulous job creating these shelves, and of course they do store some of my wet goods too, right? The things that I've bottled. But on the left-hand side, you can see how many dry goods I store in those jars.
Right, and this room is dark, and so it provides an optimal environment. There's no windows, so it's a good place to store these kinds of things.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to treatment methods, because now we've talked about the container. The container is important, and you can select the kind of container that you want. But each one of the containers needs a little bit different treatment method. Now, see these critters here? These are weevils in some wheat. We don't want that. When you open up your food storage, you do not want to see anything like that. Insects come in various life stages and require special handling to destroy each stage. If you go to the Provident Prepper, 8 food storage enemies and how to slay them, we go through all 8 things that could really damage your food storage and the best way to make sure that you extend the life of your food storage.
Oxygen absorbers are a pretty important part of the canning process, and these actually do a better job of pulling out the oxygen than methods where they suck out all the air. These actually,
like vacuum packing?
Yeah, the vacuum packing. These actually tie up all the oxygen, which isn't all of the air, because that leaves the nitrogen and other things in there. The nitrogen doesn't allow any growth of microbes or critters, but that oxygen is all tied up, and so these oxygen absorbers do a wonderful job of helping you preserve your food. Another method is the dry ice method. Obviously, that's frozen CO2. This actually displaces, and we use this in our buckets, this displaces the air in there. So you put 3 or 4 inches of grain in the bottom of a bucket, you put in this dry ice, and you probably want to wrap that or maybe put a little paper towel over it.
Just to prevent it from burning the grain.
Right, just to keep the grain good. And then you can finish filling that bucket. Then that dry ice and the CO2 that creates the dry ice is heavier than air, so as it sublimates or turns into a gas, it's going to push all the oxygen out the top of the bucket, and then you're left with a bucket that has no oxygen in it for the critters to grow in.
Yeah, so it's really important you don't seal that bucket right away. You want to wait 30 to 60 minutes at least, or else you've created a dry ice bomb, which is a felony, so don't do that. But you might wonder why you shouldn't just put oxygen absorbers in there. And there's a really good reason. It's because the plastic buckets are permeable. Do you remember how we talked about the number 10 cans won't allow any oxygen in there, a true oxygen barrier? So anything that will create a true oxygen barrier, like the Mylar bag or like the glass jars, those are great for oxygen absorbers. But the plastic, actually air will infiltrate in eventually, and so it doesn't create a true oxygen barrier.
In the buckets, the oxygen absorbers don't work nearly as well because those buckets will allow some infiltration of air. And so that's why we prefer to use the CO2, the dry ice, and push all that oxygen out, and then those buckets can be sealed, and there won't be opportunity for the creatures to hatch.
But if you put the oxygen absorbers in, you create kind of a vacuum, so you're making a situation where the oxygen wants to come into the bucket. When you use the carbon dioxide, there's no vacuum created, and so it's like this happy balance that just stays put.
Diatomaceous earth comes from marine diatoms, fossilized remains of marine diatoms, and this comes as a white powder. This is harmless to humans, but it's got little sharp microscopic spines that is deadly to exoskeletons. So this actually works really well. You can mix 1 cup with 40 pounds of grain, and obviously you don't want to breathe the dust. It probably won't hurt you.
It's a
but
very, very fine
very
powder.
fine.
It's very fine.
And so it's better not to breathe the dust. You may want to wear a dust mask.
Yeah, and this is totally, it doesn't have a taste, it's completely harmless, but this is not one of the ways that I actually treat. This is not one of my chosen methods.
And you do need to make sure you get the food grade. There are other varieties out there, but make sure you get a food grade Diatomaceous Earth, and it will do a good job.
All right, so now you know your long-term food storage. First of all, you've got to start with high quality food, right? Low in moisture and low in oil. And then you're going to choose your container depending on your circumstances. And then we're going to treat it appropriately for the container that you have chosen. Now, we've got some other resources for you. If you go to the Provident Prepper and Google ingenious places to store your food supply, that one was a really fun one. And we have lots of pictures of different people's food storage and some of the really creative ways that they have found space to be able to store food. Another one is 3-month supply of food, amazing peace of mind. We recommend that you have a 3-month supply of food, just everyday foods that you eat all the time. And in this post, we really help you get started and give you some good ideas there.
Also, Google the Provident Prepper food storage. How old is too old? And this is a pretty insightful article that will give you some ideas. Sometimes we've talked to people who, once that can of food hits its expiration date, it gets tossed in the trash. And so people don't feel like they can store food because they just end up wasting a lot. In reality, that isn't the case, and that food is good for a long time if it's stored properly. And this gives you some guidance on how you can know how old is too old.
So hopefully that sums it up. But if you have any more questions, visit Long-Term Food Storage, Best Containers and Treatment Methods by the Provident Prepper, and you will learn everything you need to know. It's all in there written down for you.
We hope you have found this to be very educational and something that you can take on and do yourself.
As you can see, it's not that difficult to package your own dried goods in your own home. You just have to know a few things. So now, for the question of the day, what's your favorite way to package food for the long haul? Have you had great success, or perhaps some failures that you'd like to share with our audience?
Failure's okay. That's how we learn. So we appreciate your willingness to learn and your willingness to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, thanks for being part of the solution.